Welcome to the Braemar Life Skills Academy podcast. The world is changing faster than ever, and the world of education is too. Advances in psychology, biology, and a whole range of other fields have opened up new lines of thought about the purpose of school and how it can best serve a new generation of students. Join me on the Braemar Life Skills Academy podcast every week to explore these new ideas. In last week's episode, I was happy to take some time away from the mic and pass it off to one of our Braemar teachers, Mrs. Hashina Pillay-Cook. Hashina was joined by a number of Braemar students talking about what Black History Month means to them. Today's episode, I'll be joined by Braemar teachers Annie Chan and Olivia Carter. Annie and Olivia are ESL teachers, and they're going to be talking to us about their own journeys in language learning and what they've experienced as language teachers. And we are back with another episode of the Braemar Life Skills Academy podcast here at Braemar College in downtown Toronto. My name is Mike Helsby. I'm the Director of Student Experience here at Braemar, and I'm feeling very relaxed and joyful and just at ease being joined today by Miss Annie Chan and Miss Olivia Carter, two of the wonderful language teachers here at Braemar. Annie, Olivia, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Now I'm going to give the sort of canned bios here, but I'd love if you just jump in afterwards and fill in all the messy details and talk to us a bit about how you got your start. But just so the folks at home know who we're dealing with today, we've got Annie Chan. Annie became fascinated by the Canadian education system from her studies in a pre-service teacher program at York University in 2011. She is continuing her education career at Braemar College since moving to Toronto. Having been immersed in an exam-oriented language learning context since she was born, she finds teaching here to be an exciting and rewarding change, as she often sees smiling faces in the interactive and engaging learning environment that she helps to create. Such precious moments are something that she has hardly seen in previous 10 years teaching in Hong Kong, and she is inspired to continue along this educational path. Annie, we're excited to learn more about that path in just a minute.
Yeah.
And we're not going to forget Miss Olivia Carter. Olivia is a creative, dedicated to leaving the world with her tank empty. I love that you wrote that, and I'm going to come back to that. To that end, you may come to know her as Miss Carter, teacher of ESLC, but she is also a published author of the children's book Jamaican ABCs with Auntie Olivia. She's a gospel and Jamaican folk singer and a self-proclaimed rover. As a proud Jamaican, she understands firsthand the importance of honoring her learners' linguistic and cultural identities in the teaching and learning process. She loves to use these experiences and values as conduits in the English language educational process. We could just start there, and I'm just going to leave things to you for the rest of the episode. Maybe I'll start with Annie. Talk to us about a little bit about what it was like growing up where you're from, and how language learning became a part of that upbringing, maybe how it fed into whenever you decided that being an educator was going to be a part of your life's journey, and perhaps what that's been like for you since.
Sure. I was born in Hong Kong, and I'm not sure everybody knows Hong Kong is a very the exam-oriented education system. And we keep changing. We kind of catching up with the technology, and we are going too fast, I would say. So as long as we have the education system here, everybody is crazy about it because we want to be the best one. We are so competitive, and that's why when you go to school, we want to go to the very top school, and the parents are also crazy about it, and it's a lot of stress as a student. And I was born in Hong Kong, and when I was young, I studied in a Chinese primary school. So all the language we use is Chinese, our mother tongue, and Cantonese. And it's hard for us to learn English in a very natural environment. Right. And what we did is grammar drilling, exams. We have a lot of practices for all for skills, all on papers. We hardly speak naturally. We don't have the practice. We don't know what to speak at all until long time until I graduate from high school. And I realized I don't have the natural conversation practice with human. I just have the exam. So all is like I'm like a robot. I just have the script. If I without the script, I don't have any natural conversation. I don't know anything about the slang. So it's there is a sarcasm like if we learn English in Hong Kong according to the textbook, when someone asks, how are you? And I would say, I am fine, thank you. And you? And that is the pattern. But after I went to other foreign countries, I realized that is a joke. That is something the foreigner will laugh at. And it's not a natural conversation. But all we learned is something, if you ask me, how are you, Annie? I'm fine. And that's it. But actually we should say, good. Or, and you, it's more natural way. So, I feel like what I lack of, is something I should, I hope that I should have realized I should have learned something more natural. But it is most of the Hong Kong students face every day. We just have the exam-oriented everything. We focus on, if you want to go to top university, you need to be the best 20% out of all the Hong Kong students. We try a lot. But how about the rest of the 80? They feel like we are loser. Forever. And that is how you can see sometimes sad stories from Hong Kong. We have a lot of students, maybe commit suicide because of this stress from school, and because parents also put emphasis on you need to be the top one, and it is hard. And until I think I was lucky because I had a chance to go to Toronto, the York University, when I was doing an education program in Hong Kong. And while I realized here is the natural way to learn English. We have a lot of discussion. I never had it in Hong Kong, even in university. We just sit here and study. And here we have a lot of tutorial discussion, speaking. And at that moment, I realized what I have learned for the speaking is not the way that the natural speaking conversation. And at that time, I'm already about 20 something, and it seems like is this the time for me to really learning English? Before, so the 20 years before, it's not the thing. It's just the being a robot, trying to be the elite in the Hong Kong education system. I'm sorry, I seems like I'm telling something bad about Hong Kong, but it's the true story. That I think Canada here give me a new phase of education and how I become a more international educator. And I found that, if I have a chance later, come to Toronto or other foreign speaking country, I would contribute myself and try to learn so that I can become a more, I think, a more... not inspiring, but try to be helping the teenagers to become good citizens. That is my goal. That's a very big goal. But what I need is try to learn more natural English instead of keep having the robotic English language in my mind. So that is a life-changing moment when I have had the program immersion in Toronto. So that is I would say I'm lucky here. So I am still learning from each of you and also from my students, because sometimes they are very creative and also very lovely. And I'm so blessed. Thank you very much.
We say it often on this podcast, but it bears repeating that old cliche that as a teacher, you kind of feel bad because you end up learning perhaps more than even the students do, and often so from them. Annie, you said sorry, but like your story, nothing to be sorry about.
That's
You lend so much hope, I think. Like, it's so inspiring hearing about those different stages. I think so many people get into their adulthoods perhaps without a few skills that they wish they had. Maybe they wish they played an instrument or learned to drive or developed a second or a third language, and we feel like, my youth is over, so that chance has passed. And yet we're so lucky at Braemar to meet so many people who moved forward in those different skill acquisitions, whether it's language or otherwise, often later in their life.
Yes.
Right? And you've said that you were inspired at 20. It's so nice to know that, even as I continue to age, maybe at 40, I'm going to be inspired in a certain direction, and that those possibilities are still very real and very lively. So I take so much joy from listening to you talk, because you have that experience and you bring it into the classroom. You really do.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's true.
Olivia, same kind of question, but how does that resonate with you, and how does it compare with your experience?
Oh, wow. In so many ways, I do. I echo some of Annie's experiences, though there are also points that I can say there are differences, because in Jamaica, English, of course, is used in the schools. English is a formal language. It is our first language on paper, but because of our history of enslavement and colonization, we have what we Jamaicans would refer to as a mother tongue, which is Jamaican patois, and that can be heard in our songs, in our performances, etc., in our folk culture, because we have a history that is so connected to our African ancestors. When they were taken to Jamaica and were forced to learn a language that was different from their own, they had to let go of their names, their, as I said, their language, their music, and everything to embrace that which was foisted on them. So we celebrate our Jamaican patois, but at the same time in schools, we are taught English, and at home we are able to speak in patois because it's a spoken language by and large. So on the radio, you hear English. On the TV, you see English and everything. But when you're talking with your friends, you're speaking in patois. And so when you now enter the classroom as an English teacher, you're faced with the challenge of trying to, how best would I say this? You're trying to, I guess, straighten their English. Because back then, that's what it was referred to, like patois was a contamination of English. And so there was a lot of shame associated with our mother tongue, patois. And so now, because of education and because of exposure and an understanding of how languages are formed, and because I studied linguistics, I realized, okay, English itself was a form of a patois, and it's just, again, elitism and colonization that makes us look to the language as something, to be revered and something to aspire towards. But I started to realize that there's nothing to be ashamed of in my own language, and because of that, I wanted to enter into the classroom empowering my students, want to be proud of your native language, and use it even as a tool in learning English.
Yeah, sure.
And when I now started teaching, when I was teaching in Japan, I saw that you use the person's native language to help them to as a sort of a scaffolding, and so that they can access the language that they're trying to learn. So I will always say, as you said in my introduction, you have to allow your learner to embrace where they're coming from. Because if that child or that student or that learner is in the class in a place of shame, there's no way you'll be able to empower them to learn what it is that you're teaching them. So I am always advocating for, Jamaican pride, being proud of who you are, being proud of your language, being proud of your background. And I want my children and my students to always feel that pride and that comfort in themselves, regardless of their identity. And me, I moved from Jamaica to work in Japan, and I'm now here in Canada, thankfully in a multicultural, multinational classroom environment. And I am so happy when my students can say, oh, this is how we say it in Vietnamese. This is how we say it in Korean. This is how we say it in Bangladesh. I remember we were teaching onomatopoeia 2 weeks ago. And the students were able, when I said, okay, how do you say ding dong in your language? And it was such a fun experience, every student saying it in their own tongue,
Yeah.
And that is what, to me, teaching English is about. We are not here to strip you of who you are. We are here to give you a tool to access the billion, population of English speakers. And also, because most people are using English, it's an economic tool, it's a social tool, it's a tool in many ways, but you are given this tool to communicate your identity. You are given English to communicate who you are as a Vietnamese person. You're given English to communicate who you are as a Korean. And that is the power of language. I think it was Nelson Mandela who said, if you speak a man's language, you speak to his heart. So you've learned English. Okay, great. Now, what can you tell me about who you are as a person in English? And you're communicating it in English. Maybe now with that information, I'm able to say, okay, I'm keen. I want to learn your language. I want to learn your culture, because that's always what's happening in my class. I'm so now excited to go to Bangladesh. I'm so excited now to visit the Ukraine, of course, when everything settles. And I'm interested in the Iranian culture, the food, and all of that, because my students are now able to tell me what it's like in English. And that is, to me, what the ESL experience, EFL, ESOL experience is about.
You said it all.
You're kind. You're very kind.
The great mystic and teacher Sadhguru and his Isha schools, if you look at the Isha curriculum, there's not a lot there that you would recognize from the more traditional, say, Western education system, but the one thing that they include is the English language learning, and he refers to it as a passport to the world.
That's it.
Yeah,
Right?
sure.
And I've heard it, language is a technology. It's a tool, as you said, and it's a technology of sharing our humanity.
That's right.
So there should be no, even just with that value set, if that was the only thing in your toolkit, that's enough to sort of dispel some of the elitism, some of the hierarchies that we associate with language.
There you go.
I'm not going to be able to do it justice, but so I'm just going to say that I'll post it to the episode summary when we get there. But there's a great little 10-minute YouTube clip that I used to show when I was teaching in England. I was teaching grade 6s and grade 7s. Folks who have lots and lots to say, but not necessarily the full vocabulary to get all those expressions out. And you could tell that was sometimes a sore point for them. So I showed them this little video. Thank goodness I'm not able to name the creator just yet, but whoever put it together, thank goodness for them, because it describes the history of English in 10 steps. And it shows you exactly as you just said, Olivia. This used to be the language of the streets, the poor. It was an anti-aristocratic language, right? If you were living in England before 1066, you were speaking French if you wanted to be, right?
There you go.
And we've taken on so many influences, right? English is not English. English is French, German, Latin, Shakespeare, Ben Jonson, right? All those globalized influences, and more to come. All of which is just to echo your sentiment. It's all about sharing. It's all about sharing mutual humanity and mutual interest. Talk to us a little bit about those early experiences as language teachers. I remember walking into Braemar. I was on my second term. Wasn't quite sure what classes I'd be teaching in that second term, and our principal, Virginia, came to me a couple days before term and said, "You got an ESLB and an ESLC." And I think my heart almost stopped. Maybe I should go back to some of those earlier job dreams. It was really scary for me. And I was coming out of a literature degree where I was used to some very, very high-minded English education, and I felt a distance. I felt like, how do I convey the simple structures, right? How do I meet these kids where they are? And it was a learning experience for me. Annie, what was it like for you at the start? And then right back to Olivia, talk to us about Japan.
So I still having the ESL B and C now.
It was great to start with you.
I think I kind of understand how you scared of maybe you have no idea how they have English foundation, because also a different cultural background, maybe different they may have already learned something in their home country, but maybe the language, the mode of instruction, maybe in their own language. So I heard that I did have some experience when I taught in Hong Kong. So basically, I was in the school mostly lower banding, so they have weak English foundation. Some of them came from China. And I still remember one student told me, oh, you know, Miss, when I studied in China in my primary school, all we have is all the Chinese word on the English textbook. And I was a question mark here. How can you learn an English word? You just have the Chinese audio translation? And he said, yes. And when it comes to reading aloud and learning English, I try to speak more English with him. Sorry, miss, I don't understand. And then he switched to Chinese because he knows that I know Chinese, right? And then, wow, it's totally not a proper English learning environment. We kind of code switching, and sometimes I use a lot of Cantonese to translate and then maybe teach a little bit vocabulary. So I just assume that here, ESL B or C, if the student only got a very maybe a weaker English level, I just try to use some tactics that I gained from the classroom in Hong Kong, but I will stick to speaking in English, of course. I will not switch to any Chinese. Even I have a Chinese student here. He speaks Mandarin to me, I understand, and I keep saying, you need to try to speak in English. So I think the challenge is, nowadays we got the technology, right? We have the Google Translate, all the thing with the mobile phone easily. They have a kind of habit. If there is a sheet all in English, they use the phone and then do the Google Translate all in a few seconds. You got your Korean, Chinese, whatever you want. And that is the practice. But I think I would try to encourage students. I all know that even if I go to Japan, I don't know how to read Japanese words. I would do the same. But for my leisure purpose, when I go to grocery stores, I know, oh, what is it? And then I buy something. But it is your language learning. We need to be more serious because you have the exam. You need to be promoted to higher level to finish your high school. But I know that, I understand that is the first step for them to try to do a little bit of Google translation, but I tell them the correct way, how you can not only rely on fully for the Google Translate, but you still need to learn the skills, how you can master or learn a little bit more of the vocabulary. And I try to encourage them, so not to stop them to not using the Google Translate, but they still using, but I kind of giving them some skills and kind of correcting, not really relying on such technology. I know that is a very powerful and convenient technology nowadays, but yeah, this common to see the student like, oh, once I got the whole piece of English and do this, you can obviously see in the classroom, especially ESLB. But I try to encourage them. Okay, I understand, but maybe there are some more ways that we can practice. For example, instead of doing the translation, why don't we pick up this and read aloud? So each of you take turns. So you have one sentence, and next is Mike, and next is Olivia. So we take turns and practice more English reading aloud. I think that a student find it safe when they have the script. Just like when I was young, I have the script, just like in Hong Kong. Oh, I can look at the words and then read aloud. And later on, I give them some topic. And could you tell me more about maybe from your home country? Or what is the food in your home country? Vietnamese, do you like hot pot in China? Something like this. We usually start with food, because it's easy to think, oh, that's yummy, that's delicious, and can you tell me how to cook it? So I think that is also a tool for us to connect with each other. Even though we don't have the good English, but we try to use some daily life experiences, food, maybe traveling, maybe something that we can common interests, that we can open up for discussion. And I think once they find it very secure to speak in the classroom, no matter how few words that you can pronounce in English. They feel the security. They feel like, oh, the teachers love us, even though we don't have the English, we cannot speak very well. And I think once they have this, they are they will feel like more motivated to learn a little bit more English. That is the small steps that I experience when I even teach in English in Hong Kong. All the students having maybe low ability in English, but they try to contribute a little. So there's a small step that I still using here. So I think students love this, and I always, because I see the smile on the face, even sometimes when they have got not a very good grades on their quizzes, on their tests, but still they're happy to learn, and they think it's still good. I've learned some words. So is this baby steps maybe helping the ESL B and C students. But of course, teachers, you may have different expectation and standard. You know that if they want to pass the ESL B, you have such standards. So at the same time, we are working on how they can meet the requirements for the upper level. So that is the job that we try to do every day. So I think that is quite challenging. I'm happy. Yeah. So instead of repeating everything at a very low level, so I have another job trying to keep them at the standard. So that is, that's why I love teaching. It's not the tedious thing that we just work the hours in the office. We have new students, we have new environments, new colleagues. We try to have more ideas and more skills to help our students. And also I learn a lot from the students because they are from different countries. They always tell me, oh, this one in Vietnam is very delicious. I tell you how to code it, how to cook. And this one in Korea, oh, that is very expensive. Something like this. We talk about food and also traveling. We have lots of fun. No matter there is the language barrier in English, we still have fun. So I find it very exciting and engaging also. Yeah.
I mean, I just want to can that answer and send it out as like a PD day resource for all teachers. A couple points that I really want to make sure we raise up. You talked about insisting on English communication when you're talking to your students, but meeting them where they are and talking to them about their interests. So combining what we know about immersion as a really the best way to develop language learning, where a person is engaged in more sort of unconscious pattern recognition than conscious grammar structures, etc. Right? That's how fluency is coming around. And then also, you said talking about things that they see in their lives regularly, and giving them that sense that they are contributing to your life, right? And you can see it in their eyes when they land a suggestion, or when one of their suggestions lands with you. You say, I am going to try that. Oh, I didn't know that. Thanks for teaching me that word, that food, that custom, whatever. That's the best part of their day, right? And we talk about fun and the highlights of our day as being sort of superficial things, or maybe less important than academic rigor. But what is fun if not our bodies and our minds telling us, hey, this is important and good, right? Engage, right? Dive in, right? And I didn't teach myself to smile. I didn't teach myself to laugh. That happens naturally. Fun happens naturally, and when you can use it as a tool for language learning or any learning, I mean, it's so powerful. Tim Ferriss, the great language teacher, refers to it as adherence, right? He says you got to be learning effective language, so high use language. But if you're not learning language about things that you're naturally interested in, that you find fun, right? You're not going to stick with it, right? It's not going to last. So immersion and what we've called relevance or adherence. I think any language teacher's got to really think deeply about those two pieces.
There you go.
Olivia, you were first an ESL teacher in Japan, correct?
Well, I first taught in Jamaica.
Okay.
And I had a similar background teaching English literature and language in Jamaica. And again, the students understood English. They're able to speak English. So there I was challenged with teaching, the rudiments of figures of speech and literary language, etc. So then I moved to Japan, and it was so different.
No.
It was so different. I mean, it even affected me in many ways, because every day I was surrounded by staff and students who were speaking to me in what I called baby English. And so I had to go back to school because I was losing my language.
Wow.
Because every day I moved from a place of where, okay, we're studying C's and all those kinds of things in Jamaica, to A's for apple, B's for banana. And I remembered going through a season where I felt like my brain was on fire but again, because I had experiences where the textbooks were all, in Japanese, and then you had the English sentences focused on the grammar that the students were studying. And that was frustrating.
Yeah.
And I had a mixture of teachers who were advocating the use of English as opposed to teachers who were just using English, who were using Japanese to teach English. And those experiences were definitely more frustrating because they're not learning English. They're learning how to talk about English, but they're not learning how to speak English. And I had the opportunity to work at the Board of Education at the level as a facilitator and a teacher trainer. And so in that capacity, you try to advocate for and equip teachers with the skills of how to use English to teach English. And of course, I would have to use a lot. It involves the use of a lot more gestures.
Yes.
Because I taught at the elementary, the junior high, and the high school levels. And so at the elementary level, it's a lot of gestures to just explain one word. And I was just so bent on not using Japanese. And so I would contort my face and contort my body, because you're going to know what it is in English. And I'm not going to use Japanese. And I guess I had the advantage, Annie, because they would just assume that I didn't know Japanese, and so they would say, what, they would try to speak to me in English, and I was in Japanese. I'm like, I don't, Nihongo wa karanai, I don't speak Japanese. And so that would force them. And I guess that's one of the objectives of the government in getting foreign teachers into the system, is to get the students to speak in English. But there's a conflict, because Japanese teachers, who speak English, or whether they speak English or not, they believe that this is the best way, and that is to use Japanese to teach. And as I spoke earlier about using the culture as a conduit, that's not what I'm speaking of. I'm speaking of using the examples, referring to the anime, using all these tools to teach, but not necessarily the Japanese as the crutch. Because if that is the case, they'll move to Canada, as you've spoken of earlier, Annie, where you came and you're like, oh, this is not how it's done. You move to a foreign country or an English-speaking environment, and you find that you're isolated because what you were taught is not what you're seeing around you. And I taught older Japanese learners, and who were in their 60s and their 70s and their 80s, and they were like in high school or in high school, this is a pen. That's how they spoke of their experience, and they were like, Olivia or Miss Carter, this isn't how we learned English. I'm sure your kids are having a much more fun time because we learned English that we've never used in the ways that we were taught it. So I have been able to experience that, where, okay, you're learning the language, English, in a more, you're trying to explain the language, that, how you use it with literature and language. But then you moved from that into a place where you're literally teaching people how to walk in the language, And then I'm now here, having moved back to Canada, or moved to Canada. This is my first time here, and I'm now in an environment where English is similar. So now I've merged my Jamaican experience and my Japanese experience, because the students here, some are more advanced. I'm teaching ESLC, so there are some who are a little more advanced than those who are not there yet. But at least I'm able now to teach a bit of the literature and to teach a little bit of how to discuss the language. And at the same time, you're teaching them how to walk, how to use the language. So my background has now merged in a sense. So, but ESLC is fun. It is fun. It is fun.
It is fun. Yeah. That was the great relief for me moving into that class. And then sometimes I would teach an ESL class in the morning and then move to like a 12U English in the afternoon. And it struck me when you were talking about your brain being on fire some days. That feeling, even sometimes when you teach a class like this with ESL students, and then you go home and start talking to your partner or your friends.
Oh my goodness!
And you're talking
down
to them with high eyebrows like this, and you're nodding. And they're like,
"You chunk everything."
"You chunk." That's right. Yeah,
so yes, please extend grace to me, because I'm just coming from Japan. I speak much more slowly. Oh my goodness! I'm so sorry.
And you try to move your body.
Yeah, I move. Yes,
you talked about going into contortions, right? I mean, thank goodness that 90% of communication is nonverbal, or else this language teaching thing would be a lot harder. I was getting exercise in those classes.
Yes,
going
sure.
Side to side.
Sweated a lot.
Yeah.
Yes.
I want to talk a little bit about maybe the lesser appreciated benefits of any language learning, and of course, English language learning is somewhat of a distinct case because it is the language of the globalized market, because it's the language of Hollywood and a few other cultural forces. So you can see why, for example, Annie, you were talking about the seriousness of English language learning in China. Here's a stat that'll knock your socks off. There are more people currently learning English in China than there are native English speakers in the world. There's 420 million Chinese learning English right now. So obviously, this is a benefit set that governments, individuals, families, businesses have all come to sort of agree. Super important, maybe the most important thing. I'll digress one more time and say my partner is from Ukraine, and they've told me again and again from the jump, from the get-go, they were told, learn English so that you can get out of here and see the world, right? This is your passport. This is your conduit. So what else? Maybe not just English. Let's mix in all language learning in general. We know there's a bunch of crazy stuff going in the brain when this is happening. You talked about the brain being on fire, right? We can see our students every day being intellectually stretched, going through those challenges. What's the payoff? What are we hoping they'll experience once they achieve, let's say, intermediate fluency?
I think once student got the proper English, they can have the exposure to a lot of different maybe different program. I mean academic program, or maybe if they go to work for going to somewhere to work, they are not really restricted to their own country. They can go to any places. They can try a lot, can enjoy the culture, and also can enjoy the environment if they have the language, because we all know that English is an international communication tool, and once you got it, if you have a proper English, not very good, maybe you can still go to anywhere else to develop your talent, to develop your any academic or non-academic view. So I think that is a very precious tool for young adults if they have the English, and that is the power. We always think, knowledge is power and English also the power, for the youngsters, right? And they may not think so big, like I want to achieve somewhat scholarship in a very top university. Right. And at the same time, they can find some interest. For example, if you're a sport player, if you got the English, I think you understand everything, and no matter it's on website, or no matter you're on the social media, Instagram. Every time when we read, or maybe we have the mobile phone, we see everything can be English, right? of course, you can translate it in your own language, but that is the way that we have the power. So that's why I think for the purpose, so that is why we always put emphasis on learning English. You may not think big, oh, I don't want to have big money, I'm not going to have the business, but Chinese people do. They want to have great business because they want English. They can have chances to earn a lot, and of course you can, but of course you can try. But I think teenagers want to try a lot of things, and they want to show up. Okay, I am not a loser. Okay, so that's why they, instead of not thinking about academic path, they can also have any sports talents, maybe performances. Once you got the English, you can open your new world, maybe worlds that you can have. You never imagined.
I think Annie has said it. For me, it's just empowerment, because empowerment in terms of, they will determine what they'll need empowerment to do, right? But with English education, the goal is to be empowered to access whatever they would like to in the world, because education itself is empowerment. I think it's George William Carver who said it is the golden key. So when you have the education in whatever it is you want to be educated in this case, in our case, it's English, you are able to access whatever it is that education will avail you. For example, I often told my Japanese students that there are about 100 million people here in Japan. And the truth is, it's not spoken, it's not used in any other country in the world except for maybe a part of Peru and Vancouver. But the world isn't really motivated to learn Japanese. It's a beautiful language. The culture is beautiful. And I want to learn it because it's been such an integral part of my life in the early 20s. And, there is so much that is available with the Japanese culture. But the truth is, if you want to know what is being discussed in the world, you'd want to know English, because it is the language of the world. Whether I like it or not, that is truly the truth. That is just the truth. And so if you want to navigate that space that billions of people are navigating, then be empowered in that space. If you wanna be able to navigate tech, then you have to be empowered with the knowledge that avails you. So I think, when parents and students decide that, okay, this is what I want to learn, this is what I want to devote or resources to, time or finances, etc. It is because at the end of it, they want to be able to, whether it is find a job in America or Canada, or open a business in Japan or China that allows them to interact with that market. You spoke of Chinese. They are quite motivated people, and they're in Jamaica speaking patois because it gives access. It empowers them to navigate, and that is something that we can learn from the Chinese. And at the same time, I'll always go back to this, they're quite proud of their Chinese identity, because English education should never mean my rejection of who I am, right? It is my desire to step onto that platform, know what it's about, and go back into my space with my people, see how we can structure what we have to bring that to the market, to bring that, to the world. I remember while I was in Japan, a Jamaican friend of mine with a Japanese car, because a lot of the cars are in Jamaica are from Japan, because it's left-hand driven, I think, right? So the Honda, the Mitsubishi, all those cars are exported to Jamaica. And I remember he called and he said, Olivia, what is the car saying to me? because it was, I think
In
it was
Japanese.
reversing or something. It was in Japanese. And so now, because of the economic situation in Japan, there is a lot being invested into English education because if the plan is to export what they have, it must be able to be communicated to the world. You know, and so that is what it is for me, empowerment to do whatever it is that they want to do.
I've heard the broader point being made there a number of times about the access to the global culture, et cetera. I'd never thought about the instances of, you mentioned tech, like
Yes.
coding language, et cetera, and then also never thought about the way that modern technology is now talking to us. We have
Yes.
refrigerators and microwaves and cars that talk to us. You better know what your oven's saying if you got a turkey in there, right?
Exactly.
That's pretty cool. Also reminded me of just what a massive, like what a serious deal English language learning is as an industry in the rest of the world. I learned recently there are schools in China dedicated to English language learning for adults that specialize in the industry that those adults will be moving
There
into
you
when they
go.
speak English. So they'll have English language schools for hotel service workers,
yes.
right?
Oh,
And so on one hand, I think that's kind of limiting because you're missing out on broader context, but on the other hand, like what better preparation for the world that you
Yeah,
hope to move into, whatever you're
specializing.
motivated by. As you said, Olivia, there's an interesting sort of dynamic with all language learning because language can be both a tool for inclusivity, right, a tool to welcome people onto the platform. It can also be a tool of exclusivity. It can be, a way that we keep others out. It's one of our, right back to our tribal ancestors. It's one of the ways we identify those who are with us and those who are not. And I think we've all probably been in contexts where we felt with it and contexts where we felt without. Our students come here to Canada and we're very, very, we're thrilled to be able to welcome language learners to the most multicultural city in the world, to a place that is where everybody who walks these streets is used to hearing language that they don't understand, right? So we're with you. We get it, right? At least to that extent. But there are massive challenges that face all language learners. What kind of obstacles or challenges are you seeing in your experience as language educators? And maybe I'd love it if each of you could just provide one tip or one strategy that stood out to you as being particularly effective in getting people past those barriers.
That's a complex question. Very
I've been
good.
accused of asking those. I don't ask sentence questions. I ask multi-paragraph questions.
Yes.
My bad.
No.
It's good. It's good. Oh, okay. I was trying to think of. I always made you go first. Yeah,
Okay,
I'm
I
so
can-
sorry.
yeah,
No,
I
no,
can
no.
switch
It's
it up.
okay.
It's okay,
It's
yeah.
good. Put you on the spot. Now I have to think on my feet. But when I think of a situation, and you spoke of it earlier, where you feel sort of you've been alienated. So in my class, I always say to my Vietnamese students, "We don't know what you're saying. You've left us out of the
Yes.
because they're about maybe 50% of the students are probably Vietnamese in my class.
Same
And
here.
Yeah, right. And so they're always having these wonderful conversations, and I'm trying to foist myself into it. So please tell me what you're saying, or teach me that word, kind of a thing. And they've made a great fun of it. But at the same time, as you're trying to do that, in trying to remain, I forgot the question.
Just the challenges that a language learner faces, because so many
Yeah.
people
Right.
give up in the first 5 to 10% of the journey, right?
Thank you. So for me, now that I'm teaching here in Canada, one of the challenges that I find is because we're in a multicultural environment, where you're teaching ESL, English as a second language. When I was in Japan teaching English as a foreign language, the culture was common. It's a homogenous society.
Right.
Everyone knows everything, and you're making reference. If I'm using anime, or if I'm using a pop star, if I'm using, all the students are able to relate to that one thing because I'm in their culture, using their culture to get through to them. But when I am in this culture now, what I'm learning is, okay, it's going to be a little more difficult finding something that's common to all my students.
Right.
And so I'm always now thinking of how to ensure that everyone is involved and everyone can relate to the content and everyone can relate to my references. And another thing is languages are also different. So for example, a basic example is SVO. In English, it's subject, verb, object, whereas they may be coming from an environment where it's OVS or a different structure of the language, right? Japanese, there you go. So as a teacher, you're in this kind of atmosphere, you're always trying to ensure that you're not leaving anyone out. And like today, we had I had some students for the Growing Successes meeting, and while they might not be able to see that these are the things that you're constantly trying to do, and they think, oh, you're doing a great job, or it's fine, I have no problem, miss. In my mind, when I'm reflecting, I know that this will be a problem for you if I'm not reflecting, if I'm not doing the reflective work, reflecting on my lessons, reflecting on my planning, so that everyone can have access, So
are there some subjects or topics or ideas that are more available to a universal audience than others?
Of course, there are. I'm speaking of if I use a pop star, for example, as a, use an article that I think, everyone should know about this kind of a situation, and then you hear, so I don't know what that is, because again, they're from different backgrounds. So those are things that I'm constantly trying to think of. And so far, I haven't had a situation where a student will say, I don't know what you're speaking about or what you're talking about, but that's something I will say that I have a challenge with. I'm here to learn, as I've said before in our conversation, but so far it's been 2 weeks teaching in Canada. That's something that I try to think about a lot as I prepare to teach. But I haven't observed a lot of challenges, but Annie might know.
So taking me as an example, so I think I'm quite confident to tell my student I'm also an English second language learner or maybe third language learner.
So powerful.
And they can see me. Maybe once I got a chance, I can share my own learning experience and how hard it was, how painful it was when went to have the grammar drilling, exam oriented, so boring, tedious. And after that, I realized one point that is usually for the student have in mind as a barrier to learn English is that they always go for perfect, no grammatical mistakes. It is always come to their mind when they are hesitating. Sorry, miss, I want that word. I'm still thinking. I want to make it perfect. But I would remind them, you may think about the keywords. We don't have to make the perfect sentence when you speak. When you write, of course, you try to get it error-free, try to make it perfect with the spelling, with the grammar. But when you speak, you just think and speak.
That's right.
Otherwise, you will struggle. I cannot get the correct word. Miss, I want that, but actually I don't get anything. And I just see the struggling face, and I feel like I'm not doing a good job, but I try to encourage. Can you tell me the keywords? What do you want to say? So I try to give the words. Wonderful. And that is commonly seen when I walk along Braemar outside classroom. Sometimes students want to say hello to me and have a conversation. And sometimes they hesitate because they don't think they can produce perfect English. And they're shy and they just are hi and bye. But I think maybe the struggle is in their mind that I want to be perfect. I don't want to give you a very bad impression because I know you are teaching English. You are English speaking learner, teacher.
I wonder how much that perfectionism is a result of having your language development judged primarily in numbers, right? You say, I'm an 87% English speaker, but I want that 100. It's like, hey, get out in the real world, kid. There's nobody out here communicating on 100, right?
Because we all went through that. Actually, we all have gone through that as babies. We all went through that. We didn't care that actually. We didn't hesitate as babies. But because we didn't go through it as teenagers or
yes.
adults learning. As you know, as a speaker of English, sometimes I'm so happy you made that point, because I need to do that flip. As teachers, we have to make that flip. Okay, this person, put yourself in this learner's shoe to understand why there's that hesitancy, understand why there's that shame, and then create the comfort so that they will know that it's okay to make mistakes. Be a baby again. Be a baby again.
Yeah.
Make mistakes.
Yeah.
Spill the milk. But once your legs have gotten stronger, you'll be fine. So just make the mistakes. Yeah.
Sure.
It reminds me of the Buddhist injunction to adopt a child's mind.
Yes.
Right? Like go into everything with that
So
child's mind, because a
that's
child's
right.
not insecure about what
There
they
you
don't
go.
know.
There
And you
you
talked
go.
about insecurity being
There you go.
an obstacle to learning, right? We make these kids feel at home.
Yeah.
That mind is open to growth.
There you go.
Yeah.
It's funny to say. I wish this conversation could go longer, and I hate to cut it off right now. But Annie's got to go back and teach another language class right now. So Annie, hopefully we can make that transition without too much pain. But
No,
it's all good.
very good. My pleasure. Yeah, thank you.
Well,
Thank you so
thank you both,
much.
not just for your knowledge, but for your attitudes and for bringing joy to this topic. I so
Oh,
appreciate it. Hoping that the educators out there got something from it. If you're teaching language, remember you're teaching a passport, a tool, a technology that brings people together. And our ability to empathize, our ability to understand one another through any means is something like a miracle.
Yeah.
So if you're teaching language out there, thanks for being a miracle worker, and we hope you keep listening to the show. Annie, Olivia, thanks for being with me.
Thank you for having
Mike.
us.
Thank you.
You were a great host.
Thank you, Olivia. Yeah, thank you.
I don't know if it's a good or a bad thing. That's the first time I guess said that, but thank you very
Yeah,
much. You
thank
made me
you.
feel good. And be sure to check in again with next week's episode, where I'll be joined by a number of Braemar students from Ukraine and Russia. I'm going to be talking to them about what the last year's conflict in Ukraine has meant for their lives.